In this lesson, we're going to take a look at using arrays. The objectives for this lesson are to learn to create single-dimensional arrays, see how to change, add, and delete data from an array, learn how to build multi-dimensional arrays, and use the ArrayList class effectively. Let's start off first with what is an array? An array is a group of common elements in a single variable. Array elements start with the number 0. All elements of the array must have the same data type. An object array may have different data types in each element just because of the nature of an object. An object can have multiple data types. Arrays are a fixed size. An array size cannot be changed after it's been initialized. We can have single or multi-dimensional arrays, and you can even have what are called jagged arrays, where each element of the array is itself another array of different sizes. Let's start out by taking a look at how to create a single-dimensional array. On line 1, we create an array by doing int and then the open square bracket, close square bracket. That defines our intention to create an integer array. I'm giving it a name, IDs, and I'm setting it equal to new, and then int, and then within the square brackets on this side is where you put the number of elements you wish to have. So 3 means that I have 3 elements, 0, 1, and 2. You can see this on lines 4, 5, and 6, where I'm assigning values into each of those little cubby holes, if you want to think of them like that. Think of them like lockers in a gym. And then on line 8, I can actually report back the length, or how many values I've declared to be used, right? So the length would be 3, regardless of whether I fill up any of the elements. The length is still 3. Then I'm going to use a for each loop that we learned about earlier, and I'm going to iterate over each int in that IDs array. So we're going to do a console.writeLine item. Let's run this and see what it looks like. And as we'd expect, it simply displays the length of 3 and then the values 1, 2, and 3. Let's take a look at an alternate way that I could have initialized that array. In the last version, what I did was I initialized the array to 3 elements, and then I set each element individually. Here on line 1, I can do new int, open, close, square brackets, but then within curly braces, I can specify what I want into each of the elements. So the compiler then infers from this that I want a 3-element array. So this is exactly the same as what we had before. Now I can also eliminate the new int here. This works just as well. So just a couple of alternate ways that you can create and initialize arrays. As I mentioned, you can create an array of any data type. So here's a string array called names that now is initialized to the following 3 values: helmet, 10-speed bicycle, and biking gloves. Now our for each item is a string in the names array, and then we can display that on the console. So when we run this, we see our 3 elements there. And let's take a look at one more example where we're going to create an array of those product objects. So again, on line 1, I bring in a using statement on the namespace that the product class lives under. And then I say product array, products is the name of the variable, equals to new product subscript 2. So I want 2 elements. So then on line 5 through 8, I say product subscript 0 is equal to a new product, and then I initialize a product ID and a name. And then on lines 10 through 13 is where I do products subscript 1 equals new product. Product ID is 2, name is equal to a 10-speed bicycle. So now I have filled in both of those elements of the product array with an individual product. Now on lines 15 through 17, I can iterate over that using a for each product item in products. So each value that goes into that item variable is a product. And then I can do a console.writeLine on the product ID plus a space plus a dash and then another space and then the item.name. If we run this, we'll see our two product values in that two-element array. Now that we've seen how to initialize an array, how do we change values? How do we add data? How do we remove data? Well, as I mentioned, arrays are fixed size, so adding and removing can be a little bit of a challenge. Well, let's take a look at manipulating array data. So here we have our string array, and to change a value, you simply reference the element that you wish to change. So names subscript 1 equal to, and then the new value. So brake pad is going to replace 10-speed bicycle. So when we display this, it should display helmet, brake pad, and then biking gloves. So changing a value is fairly simple. Let's take a look at the code required to add an array element. Adding data is not so simple. So here I've got the same string array called names. It's helmet, 10-speed bicycle, and biking gloves. In order to add something, I need to actually create a whole new array and give it the old array size plus 1. That's what you see on line 4 here. A string array called names2 equals a new string, names.length, so that'd be 3, plus 1 gives me an array size of 4 for names2. Now I need to copy the old values to that new array. So I iterate over the names.length using a for loop. So for int index equals 0 until index is less than names.length. So that'd be 0, 1, 2. Increment the index each time. And then on line 8, names2 subscript index equals names subscript index. So it copies them over 1 to 1. Then into that last position in names2, which is names2.length minus 1, right? So it's 4. That's 3, 0, 1, 2, 3 is the fourth element, equals brake pad. So now I have a new array with one more item in it that I can now iterate over on lines 15 through 17, and I can then see the item that has gotten added. So it's unfortunate, but this is the only way to work with arrays. Now don't worry, there are other things that you can do to make this much easier. We typically don't use arrays that much anymore. We use what are called collections. And again, collections will be covered in another course on object-oriented programming. Instead of doing all that looping and everything, there's actually an easier way to do this. So again, we have our names array. On line 4, we're still going to create a new array, but now instead of doing the looping to assign everything, there's actually on the array object names dot copy to. There's a copy to method. And we're saying we want to copy all the old values to names2, comma, starting at position 0. So it's going to take 0, 1, 2, and 3 and copy them into names2. Now remember, I made names2 one more in length than names. So now I can add that item into the last position. So the only thing I did was I eliminated the looping by using the copy to method on an array class. Well, let's now take a look at removing an array element. So we're going to start out with our names array again that has helmet, 10-speed bicycle, and biking gloves. This time what I'm going to do with this string names2 is I'm going to set it equal to a new string that's the names.length minus 1 because I'm going to now take away an element. So now what I need to do is copy the old values to the new array, but take away that element that I want to get rid of. In this case, I'm going to do the second element. So I'm going to create two index variables, original index and new index, starting them both at 0. I'm going to say while original index is less than names.length. If original index is not equal to 1, 1 being the second element, that 10-speed bicycle is that element that I want to remove. So if it's not equal to that, I'm going to set names2 new index equal to names original index. So it's taking the value out of there and putting it into names2. And then I increment new index by 1. And then regardless of which one I'm doing, I'm always going to increment original index because I need to go through the original array, all of those elements. I need to go through all of them. But the new index should only increment when I put one into the new array called names2. So by doing this, it loops through until I've done every one but that second element, where original index is not equal to 1. And then I can display the new array down here on lines 19 through 21. So if I do this and I run it, we can see that I get just the first and the third element. Let's now take a look at creating multi-dimensional arrays. There's not much call for multi-dimensional arrays too much anymore, since we have other object-oriented constructs that we can use, such as collections, but every now and then you might need one. So what you do to declare it is string, open square bracket, and then how many dimensions you want is separated by a comma. So in this case, 1 comma means 2 dimensions. 2 commas would mean 3. I then can initialize this array within curly braces, and then curly braces within that say the first array is prod1, prod2, and prod3. It's a string array of 3 elements. And then the second element there, helmet, 10-speed bicycle, and biking gloves, is also a 3-element array. I can then report on the length of the array and the rank. Let's go ahead and run this just so we can see what this looks like. So the length is 6 because there's 6 items in there all together, but the rank is 2. That means how many elements there are in this multi-dimensional array. Then what I did here is I simply displayed products 0, 0, product 0, 1, product 0, 2. That relates to prod 1, prod 2, and prod 3. Then I moved to that second rank, and I could see products 1, 0, products 1, 1, products 1, 2, and that lines up with helmet, 10-speed bicycle, and biking gloves. Now what I could also do here is I could use a for each loop to iterate over this as well, or a for loop, either one would work just fine. So instead of doing this here, I'll go ahead and replace that with a for loop. So for int index equals 0, index is less than 3, index plus plus, I can now do a console.writeLine on products 0, index plus a dash plus products 1, index. So in this case, I've kind of matched up where the things in that first array, prod 1, prod 2, and prod 3, are like a product ID or product number for helmet, 10-speed bicycle, and biking gloves. So when I run this one, we see that I get those corresponding elements out of each one, and that's just because of the way that I wrote that for loop. Now, another way that we could do this, as I mentioned, is we could actually use a for each as well. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to actually iterate over each item, which is a string, in products. So let's see what this gives us. So now you can see it simply dumps out each element within the whole multi-dimensional array.